Hey, welcome everybody back to GoBeercats. As you can see today, I am Darin, and we got Coomer joining us today. Brendan is out in preparation of the school year, and hopefully a new member of the family. So I am running in his stead today. Unfortunately, no intro with that because he took that with him. How you feeling, Coomer? Feeling great to be back after the over and unders?
2-week hiatus. It was a nice welcome back a couple weeks ago to do the over unders with you fellas. I felt a little rusty there. Definitely have. I have to admit, the one pick that stuck with me that I felt most uneasy about was the Bearcats over. In hindsight, I was like, man, I can't believe I ended up at a Bearcat over. But alas, I still think it's very much doable and possible. And having researched what's going on with the team offensively, I think I feel a little bit better heading into the season than I did 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, well, that is the key word of the day there, offense. We covered defense last week, and today we're going to give a nice little offensive breakdown. Not a full preview. We'll have to wait till after camp to really have a full picture, but we're going to look at last year's numbers, who's who as far as new faces, and then the big stars returning. But before that, it is...
I know... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's time for a beer.
Okay. All right. There we go. I was a little confounded that we hadn't talked about drinking because I intentionally went and retrieved a beverage for this evening.
Yeah. Well, what are you drinking on today? Let people hear
it. Besides this gargantuan bottle of water next to me, I went ahead and I'm not going with a beer this week. Instead, I poured myself a Russell's 10-year little sipper here. Kentucky bourbon. So cheers, Darin.
Cheers. I did find one leftover Urban Artifact strawberry and cream in my fridge. So unfortunately, my parents could not make it down this weekend due to some unforeseen circumstances. Everybody's all right though. So when my buddy comes down next week, hopefully he can run me some good stuff from Cincinnati, or maybe I'll find something else here. But after that,
they don't sell beer in Tennessee. What's going on?
Well, they sell beer here, obviously. I had the tailgate brewing stuff the other week, but I was supposed to go to the brewery with my parents, but obviously that got kind of shut down.
Gotcha.
But sometimes you just want some more taste of home.
You're not converted to like a Tennessee whiskey drinker at this point. You're sticking with beer.
Sticking with beer, especially for the season coming up. So I gotta get that Cincy Light gullet going there. So
right.
Yeah. And with that, let's talk some offense. So looking at the numbers last year, we were 5th in rushing. We were 3rd in the Big 12 on that. That was at 217 yards per game.
We were a great rushing team.
Yes.
Yes. Lots of yards.
Yeah, that whole sort of stretch play run game, a little bit slow to get going, and obviously there were some struggles with breakaway and big splash plays and getting to the second level. But I think that vision really started to show towards the end of the season last year. Unfortunately, we really couldn't finish that off in the red zone. Hopefully that will be alleviated this year. We are 87th in passing as of last year, 209 yards per game. That was good for 12 of 12 in the Big 12. So not great. Obviously the conference has kind of moved away from slinging it, if you will, and kind of moved back to rushing. But even still, 87th in the country on that isn't good when you want to be able to switch it up. Emory Jones, was advertised to be able to have a good deep ball and cannon, but he really couldn't seem to find the time, or if he did, receivers dropped the ball or he overthrew him,
Yeah, a couple of issues. I thought our offensive line was great at run blocking last season, unequivocally successful in that area. Running backs were productive. Yeah, I remember the head coach bemoaning the fact that we were lacking in big plays or explosive plays. And at one point, maybe one of the more polarizing moments of the season was when Satterfield seemingly was griping about the fact that the running backs weren't breaking off long runs or long enough runs. I'm well documented believing that is very much over exaggerated and not the main issue this team had. Red zone execution to me was one of the most frustrating things to watch throughout most of last season. And heading into this year, besides the red zone execution, I would say the second most frustrating thing to watch was Emory Jones' play. He got off to a firecracker of a start against Eastern Kentucky, and it was basically downhill from there. I'd say even the first 3 quarters of that Pittsburgh game would leave you in a very healthy mental spot from the Bearcats standpoint offensively. Fourth quarter sort of melted down, and then from there, it was far and few between in terms of offensive harmony, let's say. But I think, frankly, we're going to get into what the team looks like this year and one of the key additions and maybe key subtractions as well. But I think quarterback play is certainly where we have the lowest bar in terms of seeing improvement. Like that's where we have to see improved play is what's happening at the quarterback position. And we know there's a certain someone, Sorsby, who's going to be a big part of that, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. And who knows? It may not be Brendan Sorsby. I mean, the image that was sold is that, yes, he was brought in to be the starting quarterback, but, from what has been said every other interview is that it's a competition, or at least they're competing with each other. But, when you bring someone in, you hope that they are the starter without a doubt and they can hold their own. Otherwise, you worry about having another Emory Jones situation like last year. But we'll talk a little bit more about that with some new faces. But to your other point, scoring. We were 33rd in yards, so we were ripping off, solid offensive numbers until where it counted, and that was scoring at 86 with 24 points per game, which was 11th in the Big 12. And surprisingly, 33 being 33rd in yards still was good for 9 out of 12 in the Big 12, surprisingly. So a big offensive conference, if you will. I want to talk a little bit more about quarterback. I wouldn't call myself an Emory Jones apologist, but more of a take it easy on the kid kind of guy last year.
How old is that guy? 24, 25?
24, yeah.
When do you stop becoming a kid?
I think at a certain point when you're the one talking about, sports on a podcast, everyone's a kid to you.
Yeah. And when we're luring over players with highly lucrative NIL deals, I also think we can hold them somewhat to a standard of play. Emory was a disaster last year. And I thought too, people were a bit quick to judge early in the season, but it kind of built upon itself. And to me, it looked like mentally he lost all confidence as the year went on. I wouldn't go so far as to call it the yips, but he wasn't seeing the field the way a quarterback needs to see the field by the end of the season. Slow to make the right decision, quick to make the wrong decision. Lots of rushing attempts, probably too many Emory Jones rushing attempts. And I think if we're going to redirect our offense this year, at least the rushing attack, to be more running back centric, that's good news for our team. We've got very good running backs. We've got a very good run blocking offensive line. That's going to be productive for our team this year. But yeah, I don't know. I think that it's okay to criticize Emory Jones. What are you apologizing for? How do you defend him?
No, it wasn't even like he was the lone reason. There's a lot of he was kind of like the lone reason, that we were losing when there was there were indicative issues. There were things indicative of other issues in our offense. Obviously, a lot of things start with the quarterback. He is the technically the second person to touch the ball. If you're counting your center, by the time
I certainly sympathize with you on Emory Jones cannot be your 1A for problems.
No.
The head coach should be the 1A. That's I always thought it was kind of but it seems like we shouldn't be throwing the quarterback under the bus as a way to sort of mask our disappointment in how our coaching staff is performing in year one. That to me, Satterfield and the coaching staff is where more of the onus should be put on for why we had such a disappointing year in 2023. And if we're going to see improvements in 2024, Sorsby and maybe more talent at the quarterback position will be a part of that. But no doubt our coaching staff has to create a team that is better at executing pretty much in all phases.
Yeah.
And we beat ourselves in a plethora of ways last year. It was not just offense. There were games we lost because of secondary breakdowns. There's games we lost because of multiple special teams mistakes, and our coaching staff running out the same returners to make those same mistakes again. So I think I do agree with you on the fact that like Emory Jones is not the scapegoat for everything bad that happened in 2023, but he was subpar for what we expected and the investment that the team made in him.
Absolutely agree to that point. But speaking of some of those other issues, obviously quarterback, we expect more play. It does, like I said, it starts with him at least from getting the offense going to start the play without a doubt. It goes without saying that's how offenses work. But then, the line breakdown for passing, was he running as much because he wasn't comfortable in the pocket mentally and, physically? Scott Satterfield coaching, the offensive play calling down in the red zone. We're running the same guys out there, like you said, for special teams, making an adjustment too late to pressure Emory Jones to being a better quarterback by giving competition. There are so many questions that need to be answered. And I also don't think he was necessarily wrong with running backs being able to break away, because that was an issue too. Obviously, you want to say it a different way as a coach, maybe, but it wasn't necessarily a wrong observation.
If your running game is as productive as it is, I think any coach with a running game that was producing as much yardage and operating as effectively as it was, it's strange for the coach to harp on them not being as fast as he wishes they were, especially because Miles Montgomery was a fast running back or is a fast running back running for Central Florida this year. But it was just strange timing and strange phrasing and a strange focal point when there's so many obvious glaring holes that are a bigger issue. Anyway, absolutely. I don't want to, we definitely don't need to make it a podcast, relitigating 2023. I just think I've already heard him mention explosive plays. It triggers me. I will fully admit that. I would love for us to come in this season and just be better in the red zone. How about we're just better in the red zone? How about we don't shoot ourselves in the groin as consistently as we did last year? That to me, that's the bigger area of focus for the coaching staff, hopefully in 24.
Yeah, I think that one comes more down to play calling in general. And just simply execution, but execution still falls back on the coaches and having your guys ready and knowing what they need to do. The reason I bring up the run game so much is because we're looking for that 1-2 punch again. So let's go down the list of new faces and see how we try to plug these holes. Briefly mentioned Brendan Sorsby coming from IU. He is a redshirt sophomore. And obviously, the rumors, it's the era we live in. NIL helped bring him here. And you hope he performs the way he should.
So tell me this, though. Where you think there's a chance that Brendan Sorsby is not starting for the Bearcats game 1?
Not likely. I mean, there's always a possibility.
Outside of him getting injured, having a fluke injury in practice before the first game. I'm talking like this guy's healthy, full off season with him, full training camp with him.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind he's going to be the starting quarterback because of what you just said. Those 3 magic letters, NIL.
Yeah.
This is the guy. I mean, I'm getting my taxes done and I'm using the same accountant that apparently set up all of the deals for Brendan Sorsby and a plethora of other Bearcat players. I mean, this is the reality of the era we live in, where the financial component and the infrastructure a school or program can provide around that financial component is a piece of what brings a kid to the team or brings a player to the team. Sorsby, to me, this was a great win for the Satterfield coaching staff in the offseason, was landing Sorsby, someone who flashed high potential as a younger player, redshirt sophomore, lots of eligibility left. One of the most, if not the most exciting part of Bearcat football this season to me is getting behind a young quarterback with multiple years of eligibility left and seeing him grow and develop at the program. To me, it would be a huge red flag if Sorsby's not starting game 1 and is not starting every game this year, barring health.
Yeah, no, I mean, everything so far coming out of camp, spring practice, doesn't indicate anything different. He's seems like number one. I really just allude to the what in reality is probably just coach speak about everyone's competing well against each other. The quarterbacks are competing against each other. I because who wants to try to give the game away, even though we all really know what he's here for and who he's meant to be. Maybe it's a little bit of lip service that Brady Lichtenberg is pushing him a little bit, and that Samaj Jones looks better than expected for a freshman. But I don't foresee, like you said, barring any injuries, I don't foresee him losing his job in the next 2 weeks. There would have had to been writing on the wall probably already in spring at that point for something like that to happen. And looking at Brandon Sorsby, he's someone who really grew as the year went on for him. He has the type. He is the type of quarterback that Scott Satterfield likes. We've seen. Obviously, he had a Heisman, potential Heisman winner one year. He had Emory Jones because he sort of fit that prototypical dual threat quarterback, and Brendan Sorsby is no different. With the expectation that he's going to have a better arm and a little bit more accuracy, but can still escape the pocket if need be and run the RPO game.
Yeah, I it does jump out to you that he had a lot of rushing attempts in 2023 for Indiana. His longest run of the season, I've got it as 25 yards, which was in his second game of the year against Michigan State. It seems like he's a guy with a big arm. He runs big, great size overall as a quarterback. What caught my eye initially with the statistical profile is the fact that his completion percentage wasn't all that great. And completion percentage is an area that we were very frustrated by with Emory Jones. And so I do wonder, have you watched enough tape of Sorsby to give reason to be more confident, let's say, that Sorsby's completion percentage and his arm accuracy won't be the same problem that Emory Jones is? What can you tell us on that?
Confidence is the word on that. He seems confident, and that's not a quarterback lip service confidence. He's out there, interviews with a smile on his face, looks good on the run. He's a two-sport athlete, by the way, with baseball, at least was. And he is a bit of a project because of his age. He's a redshirt sophomore quarterback who stepped in last year in Indiana to, try to lead the team. I think Scott Satterfield thinks he can raise his ceiling at this point. And being here all spring, he looks like, or being here since the winter, he's looking like he's starting to make those connections with people. Joe Royer has come up as a big target as expected, and we'll talk more about him later. But it seems like he's starting to build some connections with receivers, and they're gelling. Obviously, it's gonna, what's really gonna count is when the rubber meets the road, and we're live in a few weeks. But
I'll self-correct on one thing here. I was kind of looking at the schedule in reverse. That 25-yard run came against Michigan State in the second to last game of the year, and we should drive home a point you mentioned. I see it as Sorsby threw 3 touchdowns in his first 5 games of the year, and then he threw another 10 in the last 6. The production increased dramatically. The turnovers went up a bit too. You could see he dealt with some sack issues. I don't think anyone is under the impression that Indiana was loaded with talent and operationally healthy in 2023. They're probably in a much better place heading into 2024, frankly, based on their new coaching hire. But yeah, I think when you look at the level of competition, this is another thing about Sorsby. Redshirt freshmen, these are redshirt freshman statistics in the Big Ten. And I sometimes like making fun and poking fun at the Big Ten for thinking they're at the same level or the same class as the SEC. But that's a freaking loaded conference. I mean, that's a very talented conference, high-end talent, deep in talent. And Sorsby showed that he could play at that level. And so in terms of questioning whether he can transition to Big 12 play, which frankly probably has more weakness or susceptibility in the defensive side or on the defensive side of the ball across the league, I do think that the production he had last year is going to translate well what do you call it? The exchange rate of statistics from the Big Ten will exchange well to what Sorsby will see in the Big 12 for Cincinnati.
Yeah, no, I mean you beat me to it. And to add to that, to define it, it's a better floor than compared to obviously Emory Jones last year, where his floor never seemed to really change. It was always kind of those flashes that like, oh yeah, this guy could be really good, but then you can't say that over and over and over before you know it, you're a senior, you're graduating.
Right. Just because you make a random good throw doesn't mean you're going to ever be good.
Exactly.
Like we know what Emory Jones is.
We're starting younger. There's room for development. He, came in as a redshirt freshman, played in a better conference. Obviously, like you said, Indiana was not in good straits. I mean, they were pretty much picked through from a talent perspective and shipped off to other schools. But he's coming to a conference where it is becoming run heavy again. So he may not even be expected to have to slang it as much to win games until he needs to. Maybe we're looking short passes, just whatever we can do to move chains instead of having to go for it all. Where that was supposed to be Emory Jones's, big, secondary weapon was the deep ball.
And from a scheming standpoint, I think I'm looking for Satterfield to like scheme these guys open. That was sometimes a frustration, even during the Fickle years, is like, I want to see quarterbacks having the opportunity to throw into big windows. This is not the NFL. You can scheme guys into open space and have big windows to throw into, and it should lead to higher accuracy numbers. So bare minimum, I'm expecting 60% completion percentage from Sorsby. Like, I think we should be making easy throws. The receiver corp, which I know we'll get into later, is, Xavier Henderson's got some size. The rest of them are pretty small guys. These are not guys you're going to be throwing jump balls to or contested balls to. These are guys who you should be getting into open space, looking for yards after catch, looking to throw it over the top with their speed. That's the name of the game for Sorsby this year. And if we're playing off the run first, productive, 5 yards, 6 yards, 7 yard chunks, and then leaning on the play action after the fact, 2 speedy receivers, it should be theoretically in my mind, I'm telling myself this is easy pickings for Sorsby and a great opportunity for him.
Yeah, no, I mean, you said again, scheme these guys open, and let's take a closer look at what the identity is for this offense. Obviously, we mentioned like the stretch plays for running, but they want to run a lot of things out of pistol, right? Running back lining up behind the quarterback to essentially try to keep teams guessing. And this is year 2 of that. With the knowledge or increased knowledge with offensive identity, you have guys who are going to know how to do their job, and really you're only plugging in a quarterback, obviously an important piece, but quarterback and maybe a few receivers who step up into those roles and some new tight ends. But let's keep it rolling here. Let's look at our running backs here. So we got Evan Pryor from Ohio State and Chance Williams from Grambling coming in this year. It really seems like the big thing to do, especially after losing some guys to graduation and transfers, that we wanted to find that second part of that 1-2 combination with a 1,000-yard rusher in Corey Kiner. Who's going to be that back to complement? Because Corey Kiner's, he's going to be essentially your every down, all around back. Pretty balanced, not just speed, not just power, but just kind of your get it done and make plays where he can, and as who he is. It's a competition between Evan and Chance, I think, to really see who that number 2 is going to be, because they're looking for that speed back necessarily, and someone to catch out of the backfield. Chance had, I want to say, around 800 yards last year. Did a little bit of everything, receiving and just kind of running out of the backfield. A lot of his yards still came from rushing, as you would expect from your running back. He seemed actually like the featured back there, so we're taking production from another team on that. And then Evan Pryor, just I get it. Ohio State just, they are a machine when it comes to running back. He, didn't necessarily want to seem like he wanted to wait his turn there and wanted to come somewhere he could potentially either be the starter or at least, number 2 feature. Not a lot of stats to really look at game log wise for him. Just a few touches per game, kind of late in the season as they needed more bodies at OSU. But nothing too crazy really to write home about.
I have zero concerns about the running back room because if there's one thing that the Scott Satterfield can do, it's coach and scheme holes for running backs. And we saw it year one. We haven't even talked about the offensive line unit. I think Sorsby and the offensive line are 1A, 1B in terms of importance to this team this season. Because frankly, the reason I say I'm not concerned about the running back room, our offensive line is going to carry the running back room. Corey Kiner's great. Love watching Corey Kiner run. Super hard runner. Not necessarily the breakaway speed we fell in love with from Jerome Ford, but can get chunk plays. He can get 20-yard runs, 30-yard runs, 40-yard runs. He may not finish the old 70-yard runs, but the guy's going to read his blockers well. Proved that last season. Wasn't incredibly high usage in terms of being a receiver out of the backfield in 2023. And I think Miles Montgomery was leaned on a little bit more for that. What's the sense in terms of, like third down and long? Is it going to be Corey Kiner or do Evan Pryor or Chance Williams have a better shot as a receiver out of the backfield for this team?
I think it's going to be situational, really. They really seemed like they wanted to do running back by committee last year. Who was the hot hand? And, if they were hot, they stayed in. They didn't seem like they really rotated guys too much last year in that regard. Once you were in and going, and if you were going, you stayed. And if you got banged up, then you're out. that just kind of seemed like how they wanted to do things last year. My hope is that they're going to bounce it out more. Obviously, I think it's still going to be situational.
Chance Williams has the physical profile of a guy who would do a lot of receiving out of the backfield, but again, he's only got like 24 career catches at Grambling.
Yeah,
doesn't mean that it's Grambling. It's a different world entirely. I have no idea what offense they're running. That's maybe a wild card role for him. And then Evan Pryor, you're right. There's nothing to really look at and evaluate from Ohio State. It's a pure pedigree play, high star rating coming out of high school. Surely talented. It's worked out for us in the past to pull from the depth of a bigger college and offer up the opportunity for increased reps, increased playing time. And so I'm never against betting on talent, betting on pedigree. And so I think Evan Pryor can certainly carve himself a role out here. And why not come to Cincinnati where you're coming to one of the best rushing teams in the country? So there's a great sales pitch for any running back who wants him to be in the transfer portal. This is a great way for Satterfield to build our running back room in the future, is to lean on the portal and lean on this. Just look at our production. It speaks for itself. Great NIL infrastructure. We can incentivize talented running backs to come here in the future. And I'm hoping that Evan Pryor and Chance Williams prove to be capable of thriving in what I think is an easy system to thrive in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was sort of the pitch during recruiting season. Was, hey, this is what our line can do for you. Like I said, pull from the depth of another school, or take starting talent from a lower level school. I will say what I saw from Chance Williams. His it wasn't necessarily a 50-50 split for his receiving to rushing yardage there, but what I did see that was really interesting was patience out of him. Sort of hang back, wait for that hole to develop, and then go. His line really wasn't good at like getting to second level and opening up other blocks, but he seemed like he picked his holes really well. So if he is a speed back that he's supposed to be, hopefully, behind a better line, he does, do what Miles Montgomery really struggled to do last year. Was to be that breakaway 70-yard run, see you later, house call running back. And this is no shot.
Miles Montgomery struggle. Did he struggle to do that?
He would get, caught a lot he would, you think he'd be gone, and then there's a few times, big runs last year where he got caught by somebody.
But I thought Kiner was the more guilty party on getting caught.
Kiner for sure was guilty, but
Montgomery finished a couple of longer runs. I think he
Montgomery got better at
touchdown in the Oklahoma State game. Now it was a blowout, meaningless game, but he had a 63-yard touchdown run nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. That was sort of that rushing attack coming together, right? Towards the back end of the year. But early on, obviously the timing, like you said, was a weird thing to call out and nitpick, but he wasn't necessarily wrong. It wasn't a wrong observation. It was just a weirdly timed one and really didn't need to be said.
I'm just going to keep doing everything in my power to help you leave that Scott Satterfield talking point in the past. Anything our fan base can do to not embrace that talking point would be a good thing, because to me, it makes almost no sense to harp on it.
No, it doesn't, but I see who he brought in and what their abilities are. So it kind of helps you understand the thinking of the coach, right? Who he's trying to scout. And the reason I harp on it is because this was also brought up in media days by Corey Kiner himself. At least someone targeting him and asking.
Kiner's never going to run away from people. That's true. No, Kiner's not a run away from people type running back, but you can have a great offense without that type of running back. Plenty of teams have really good offenses and score a lot of points without a running back that can run away from people.
And I agree, but I think the coach was looking for a second half to his running attack, essentially like a two-headed monster, basically. And so it's not so much to harp on our running backs were bad last year. They're slow, fat, whatever. It's more so I think Scott has a vision for, what his rushing attack is going to be. And it's not just one back. It's essentially like a two-back system. And you might even see Chance out there in the slot with Kiner out there. So there's a chance for that. So it's not to harp on, oh, I hate these guys, they weren't good enough for us. I think there's a vision that he wanted to come true that he wasn't finding necessary early last year. And he went out and got some guys to fill that need. So
time will tell. Time will tell, since both of those guys are, in Chance's case, huge jump in competition. Evan Pryor's case, not the case, but he's not seen the field. So we'll see what it's like under the big lights for Evan Pryor.
And word has it that Chance is looking good. He is adjusting to the level of competition. I mean, obviously it's a small sample size. You're playing against your teammates here, but your assumption is that these are, P4 level talent players on your roster here. Right. So, the words I'm hearing is that he seems to look the part. So I'm expecting good things from him and big playability. Because that is what the coach wants. He wants to be able to hit you, and give you a punch, or at least give another team the punch in the mouth and see if they crumble. So we will see. Only time will tell, like you said. Moving on to some new wide receivers we picked up. As you mentioned before, trying to get some speedy guys in to fill out this wide receiving core. We got Tony Johnson from FAU, Tyron Smith from UTEP, and Jamoy Mays from UAB joining us this year. I think some of those guys were, return specialists on their team last year. I want to say Tony Johnson specifically. A lot of people, when he was announced, really kind of went to his highlight reel to try to peak the speed. And that was something we were missing. Was some speed on the inside receivers. We talked about Xavier Henderson, but those other guys at 2, 3, and tight end to a lesser extent didn't seem to carry enough weight to free him up a lot of times. Once Xavier was kind of figured out to be the target. I'm excited to see how they fare. Really, in combination with our tight end room, which is hoped to be improved as well and healthy. That is hopefully going to kind of open it up for everybody. Really, you open up Xavier, then you open up everybody else at some point too. Have you looked at these guys?
It seems like this might I feel like I can confidently say this is going to be the wild card unit on the team.
Mhm.
It's a small, like, physically small receiving group. Tony Johnson 5'10", Tyron Smith 5'7", Aaron Turner. I can't remember Aaron Turner's height, but I think even Barry Jackson's like 5'11". It's a speedy group. It's a fast group. It's probably an explosive group, but small and not necessarily super proven in terms of high volume receiving history. So Xavier Henderson is kind of a sure thing. I've seen enough to be confident that he can be a good option on the outside. He was taken away pretty consistently by opposing teams as the season went on last year, and we would go long stretches of games where you couldn't even really tell he was on the field. And he's too talented for that to happen. And so the hope is, while unproven and maybe more of a wild card unit, are Tony Johnson, Tyron Smith, Barry Jackson, Aaron Turner, are these guys able to step up and increase roles to alleviate some pressure off Xavier Henderson? If not, that does make Brendan Sorsby's life harder. It does make our passing game less. We'll have a lower ceiling in that regard. But I think it's pretty clear at this point, this is the weakest unit on the offense.
Yeah. If not weakest, at least biggest mystery about how they're going to perform. Looking at some of these guys, they were your interior speedy slot receiver types. Specifically, as I harped on Tony Johnson, a lot of his, he's got some decent big runs or big, yak moments. Some okay longs, averaging around probably 30. So it seems like, he's a guy who kind of rip, you catch him in the middle open field and he rips one, and maybe he's going to break away, but catch the interior defense off guard. Aaron Turner, you hope, to step up a little bit in that regard too this year.
Aaron Turner, it's really unproven. The more you look through these guys' box scores, it's just very low action, low activity, low volume receivers. And we'll see if any of them have the potential of like taking a huge leap, and maybe they're, twitchy enough and burner enough to beat the defense every other game, every 2 to 3 games, and really make an impact that way. But it seems to me that your only like go-to type receiver on this team is Xavier Henderson. Outside of, now we'll talk about tight end here in a bit, but as from the receiving group specifically, these are a lot of like low volume, deep shot potential receivers. And it doesn't feel great. It kind of feels kind of similar to what we experienced last year. And it didn't, that process didn't work out. Different group of guys, different talent, potentially works out in this case. But to me, it's a pretty similar recipe that we saw last season, and it didn't work out well for our passing game.
I think the hope this year is that you're bringing in, despite them being new to the team, they're not new to college football. Because last year, we lost two good slot receivers to the NFL, right? And it was a scramble to see. Plus people transferring. The next guys up who would have been after them out, gone to different schools.
I think our fan base was somewhat disrespectful with how we assumed you could so easily replace Tyler Scott and Trey Tucker. Like those guys, Scott's fighting for his life with the deep receiving group and with the Bears. Tucker had some flashes with the Raiders. Like these were really, really good, highly athletic receivers, but also smaller too. Like that's something worth noting. Tucker meets the physical profile of a lot of these receivers we're talking about here. And Scott, albeit maybe higher end speed, also not someone who I think exceeds 6 feet tall. So I'm harping on the size of them, but that's not to say you can't be good at those heights. It's just that it's pretty clear what style of receiver you are at that point. These are not contested balls. These are deeper shots. And it's why, maybe something worth pointing out, it's tougher for those kind of receivers to thrive in the red zone. I never thought of Scott or Tucker as red zone receivers. That would typically be a guy like Alec Pierce who could go up and get the ball in the red zone. That is something worth noting. That red zone efficiency was a challenge for us. And part of what will drive that is if you don't have good red zone targets. This, to me, reeks of not having a deep war chest of red zone targets.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're essentially in the red zone hoping that, I mean, there's only so many styles you can play, obviously. You're hoping your tight end comes in on a shallow cross, and maybe you work your bigger outside receiver into the slot and swap the slot receiver out. Obviously, the fade to the outside, double floods, underneath to the outside. There's only so many things you can do with that. So these are not going to be your guys usually that you maybe from 20, 30 yards out, right? Then they get into the end zone, let their speed carry them, but they're not those guys, at least, profile wise. Right. And something else you said, obviously, those guys being hard to replace goes without saying. Right. But then you hope maybe your dudes who are next guys up or, getting those reps behind them would step in, but then those guys go on and either go with Luke Fickell or transfer to other schools at that point. Right. So what you're left with is quarterback transferring in or moving to receiver to help the team do what he can. Freshman receivers and then tight ends who are also with one guy who was next up and then a bunch of guys who are mysteries and then whoever else you can bring in for the transfer portal, right? So it was a lot of throwing things to the wall and seeing what sticks in that regard. And what turned out was, Xavier Henderson was that dude, and then he was figured out, right? And then not too many tight end targets. Shimon Matera obviously started to figure it out, but then rumors is that he, sort of quit playing, as the season went on. So
who was that? Who was the rumor of that for?
Matera.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah. The one person
shame on that one because he had a moment. He had a few weeks there that it was really cranking for him.
It seemed like, okay, cool. Emery's got himself another target, potentially someone he can rely on, sturdy. And then, let's not harp on that too much. Someone who does jump out, at least stats wise on paper, who does have the experience in being a number one target or high target, Jamoya Mays. Obviously, he played a level below, but he was a 1,000-yard receiver last year at his level. Now how he showed up against actual competition, Bama not so well. 2 receptions for 17 yards, but also Bama destroyed them 66-10 for his old team. So that's a little bit hard to measure up against. But other than that, I mean, he rattled off 5 100-yard receiving games, and then one that was almost there, but wasn't. So I mean, he
this is important. This I apologize for the listeners for scooting past Mays too quickly. This is the guy that potentially you're hoping, like he's definitely proven himself as like a go-to type receiver, and his average per catch, awesome. Yeah. This is a good open downfield guy, consistently does it. 5'11". That he is a nice wild card and probably the sleeper agent within this group for higher end potential.
Yes, absolutely. I haven't heard too much. At least I didn't see his name cross my face too many times or hear his name hit my ears too much. So we're kind of just going off of last year. But yeah, I mean, you hope he can be the guy, especially as a senior, right? So he's not unfamiliar to the sport at this point. Moving on. 2 tight ends in Francis Sermon from Arkansas and Joe Royer from Ohio State. Let's not scoot past Francis too much here, because obviously I know he won't get to Joe Royer. He kind of has the target on his back, if you will. Didn't play a lot. I think he had one game for 1 catch last year. And this kind of speaks to a similar situation to prior, taking highly rated talent at one point or another from a stronger school, right? And hoping he can at least round out your room. But maybe he surprises you. And I could be wrong. He also might be used more in blocking situations at this point too, as a pseudo fullback. I haven't had a chance to look at any tape or full on film from so far.
His
But that is gonna be
I
where
can
I'm
tell
going.
you after I have gone deep on his film, and those 5 catches over the last 3 years were unprecedented. I think that I have not seen something like this out of a tight end in the last 3 years of watching college football. Yeah, this is likely it's a body, it's a warm body at the position coming from a big time program. Any productivity we get in the receiving game from Francis Sherman is found money at that point. There's no necessary reason to think that this is going to be a highly productive receiving tight end option for us, but he adds some depth. Not particularly huge, 6'3" at tight end is not necessarily like above average from a size standpoint, but does have experience playing with SEC football, and we'll see how that works with the Bearcats. But yeah, there's no history of production with this guy.
Yeah, I mean, winning touchdown in the Pop-Tart Bowl. What say you?
Well, you know what?
That
That does mean something to me, because I did cite Kansas State's quarterback winning the Pop-Tart Bowl MVP award, and so the Pop-Tart Bowl does mean something to me. A touchdown in that game is something worth getting excied about.
Random hero ball, become the Fisher moment like we had in the
that was the moment that turned it all around.
If just move on, not to move on completely from Sherman, but one other thing is that his just funny, he's the one guy with the off-center picture in the ESPN roster where his like photos moved over and you see half his face. And who knows?
I need to get an updated picture of him. Like, is he evolved in just rocking a mustache now? Because that I would go, I'd be higher on him if he's now rocking a mustache.
I mean, looks like it's just the chin strap and the American flag eagle tattoo. So he's definitely at least a dude and vibe alone. So
I'll have to do some deep diving on that. The other tight end is a very, very on the handsome scale, very handsome, curly hair, strong jaw. Mm-hmm. Joe Royer. One less catch, though, in his last 3 years. 4 catches at Ohio State. Last season, it was 1 for 5 yards. What's your take on Joe Royer?
He's the target as far as a big catch. Maybe not the big catch, but maybe the big catch in the offseason for recruiting. He was brought in to, if not at least compete, be the starting tight end. At least in more on the receiving side. But no one shut up about him this from winter to some of the scrimmages that's already happened. His name is in everyone's mouth at this point. And that's what you like to hear. It's better than hearing. Now, I will say, coming out of training camp, the primary source is Bearcat Journal. Mm-hmm. You're not usually going to hear a bunch of negative stuff out of camp about players. Most guys are looking good in camp. Most reports out of camp are favorable at this time of year. This is hype season. Yes. This is when we should be peak hype. The fact that Joe Royer is a huge land for the Bearcats, I imagine it's somewhat driven by the fact that he's local, went to Elder High School. Very highly regarded tight end prospect out of Elder at the time, went to Ohio State. Not any production since then, but like, what are we hearing then out of reports of camp? Is he a receiving dynamo? What's the profile? Like, what's the comp? Are we getting any comparisons for this guy? No comparisons. Good enough speed to move downfield. Good hands, solid, can block. He's a tight end that's tight ending, for lack of an actual word.
Brent Selleck, like, what do we got going on here?
He's just a solid dude.
Well, go ahead. What's your prediction then for Joe Royer catches and yards this season?
He will be a weapon. Probably like 600 yards.
Whoa,
700. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. And that's
bullish.
It is bullish because I'm giving space to, obviously you want Xavier Henderson to be that dude, right? Hopefully he opens up this year. But your hope is also, like I said, some of those other slot receivers work out. And we're also going to be a rushing team, right? So There's only so much that can go around.
All right, last season, let me ask you this,
Mhm.
and I guess you've already kind of answered it.
Mhm.
With the Bearcats last season, Mateer had 23 catches, 258 yards, and 5 touchdowns.
Yes.
Does Royer exceed those totals in all categories?
Yes.
So you're over 23 catches, over 258 yards, over 5 touchdowns. Because again, that's what the primary tight end production was in 2023 for the Bearcats.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because you got to think, with Mateer last year, it was more he started to emerge. You know, everyone knew his name. We heard, oh, he's got flashes. He's going to be the next guy up behind our 2 NFL tight ends, you know? And it took him a while to start to really work his way into being comfortable with that, right?
He basically did nothing in the first 2 games. He had 2 catches for 7 yards in the first 2 games. After that, 3 for 50, 3 for 59 and 2 touchdowns, 4 for 43 and a touchdown, 5 for 50, 2 for 11, 1 for 1, 3 for 37 and 2 touchdowns. I don't know where the narrative came from that he, quit on the team, let's say. That's generally consistent production from a tight end in a putrid passing offense.
Yeah.
So I guess you're baking in improved passing offense, better quarterback, year 2 with Satterfield, more synergy there.
Improved relationship too.
I'll go ahead and say this. If Royer exceeds 23, 258, and 5, that's a success. Yeah. That's a success next year for us. Mm-hmm. But what we're talking about is like option 1B for the Bearcats in that case. You're saying Henderson 1A, Royer 1B.
It sounds like so far like that's the Sorsby connection right now. That seems like the guy he's comfortable with.
I'm into it.
Yeah,
I'm into it. Nipples are tingling, as old men in blazers would say.
Well, look. So we were talking about how slow start for Mateer, and then maybe Emory Jones was starting to rely on him a little bit and get that connection going. We're starting with that connection, right? It's obviously it's an intangible thing, right? The mentals, the a little bit of the IQ, but it's an important thing to have someone you rely on and target, and at least starting out and knowing that's my guy. I think
that Big Ten rapport coming in from day one, apparently.
Yeah. I don't think Emory had, for all his faults, I don't think he had that to start out in the season, last year. He had to kind of try to find that. And
theoretically, Sorsby's in the exact same position Emory was last year. New team, new offense, new tools, new coach.
Yeah.
He's facing the exact same challenges. He's got the exact same layup of a game week 1. Schedule's pretty favorable the first few weeks. And that's where you have to find the rapport early in the year, is through these first 4 games.
But I think what he benefits from is it's not totally bare bones for everybody. He's the new one. The offensive line isn't the receiver. Not all the receivers are. There's some guys who are new on offense.
Offensive line is rock solid. But you've got two of the top 3 running backs are new quarterback. 3 of the top 4, let's say, maybe 3 of the top 5 receivers are new faces. Both your tight ends are new. So we're really leaning on the rapport of the offensive line.
Yeah.
And that's not nothing. That's incredibly important. Having that infrastructure is meaningful. Don't get me wrong. If we're going to have turnover, I'd rather be at the skill positions than be at the offensive line.
Yep. Basically, he's facing the same situation, but better infrastructure. That's the word for it. All right. Yeah. Not to go back to quarterback, but Scott Satterfield was a quarterback himself. The notion usually is that guys like that know what they want out of their quarterback and can, sort of connect with those dudes, right? And build them up and interject.
Except last year.
I can fix them, right? I can fix them. Last but not least, we got some auxiliary offensive line coming in here. One, Xavier I cannot pronounce that last name. Lazawicki.
Lazawicki.
from Maine.
Polish brother of mine.
Oh, well, see, there you go. Everybody knows everybody, right? No, so I mean, he's coming in to at least, if not fight for a starting spot, at least get in that rotation, and be a guy that can be leaned on a little bit, right, in case someone goes down. That's a hard thing to do. I was
just gonna say he's a very large man. 6'5", 305, IMG Academy. That's a hell of a place to come from. But yeah, that's about my contribution for an offensive lineman. Large, huge human, Polish heritage, probably enjoys sausage and potatoes.
Yeah, I mean, look at it this way. It will look, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get into the returners, at least exciting returners. You know, and this could be Coach Peak again, taking the coach's word for it, right? Those guys aren't necessarily set to be the starters. At least, you know,
I got to get you off the smack of coach talk. You are believing too many things that you're hearing in these.
Well, at least I'm acknowledging that it's potentially Coach Peak, right? I mean, I could believe it. I'm saying if it's to be believed, right? You know, if the lip service is to be believed, it's not all these guys are guaranteed starters for the offensive line. And it's a good thing, honestly, to hear that you have, you know, 7 guys returning who can compete, and then maybe an 8th guy who can compete for a spot. And
yeah, I'd rather hear though that he's so confident in those 5 returners that there's, you know, Xavier's outside man looking in, more time with the program, train him up. Maybe he works his way into that rotation, but generally speaking, I'd rather just be rock solid. We know exactly what we have, and those are our guys. And
that's why I acknowledge it as coach speak. It's, you don't want to show your hand and you got to give them something kind of deal, right? I don't believe that Brendan Sorsby is in threat of getting knocked off by Samaj Jones, but you know, you want to hear that your backups are somewhat competent, right? And have improved all around, right? So I think it's just kind of more on that end than it is, oh no, what are we going to do? Our offensive linemen aren't as steady as we thought. Having returned offensive line anywhere, no matter what their numbers were the year before, is important, you know, because that cohesion is important. So that's it for new faces. We'll talk about offensive line a bit more. But first, Corey Kiner, the man of the hour, the Cincinnati Sun, one of the few that we have on this team. Poised to have a big year. He's on some watch list this year. 1,000-yard rusher last year. 1047 to be exact. And then that's on 192 characters. Wow, carries. And 5.5 per carry, which isn't bad at all. I mean, that's something you want out of essentially your every down back. Lacking the receiving game, obviously 12 receptions, 49 yards. And obviously we struggled as a unit to get him in the end zone and get anybody really in the end zone last year.
Yeah, honestly, I don't have much more to say on Kiner. I feel like we kind of talked. I think we kind of hit on these returners through our conversation on the units themselves. I mean, the biggest thing that jumps out to me on this list that Brandon put together of returning players, or I'm not sure if it was you, but it's the fact that you've got left tackle John Williams, left guard Luke Kandra, center Gavin Gerhardt, right guard D'Artagnan Tinsley, and right tackle DeAndre Buford. Boom. Your five returning starters for the offensive line, and that's the name of the game for the Bearcats in terms of what you can point to say we trust that, and really we trust it from a running game standpoint. Can the coaching staff make this a offensive line unit that blocks well for the passing game too?
Yeah, that's the big question for them this year: is can they improve in pass pro? Obviously, with the understanding of the system, you would hope that comes up a little bit naturally, but how much more? That is the big question. How much improved are they? There's obviously, like I said, I mean, natural improvement with understanding the system, but will they jump leaps and bounds? And being able to pass pro when called upon. I think obviously with Scott's rushing attack plans and that being his bread and butter, he also spoke on how that is kind of what you want to establish first, is being able to get these guys to run black first. That's the easiest thing to get them established on, is run pro. So you wonder how much he is going to work on pass pro this year. I mean, it's obviously he's the head coach. He's not blind to what issues are behind the scenes, are really out in front of our faces. I do want to touch on more that we do have. He did mention that we have two other guys that can back people up and rotate in if need be.
Depth is good. Depth is improved and better, and can we withstand an injury or two, which is no doubt likely throughout a football season.
Yeah. And I think that's what Xavier is here for as well. Second Xavier is to add an eighth to that. So, expectations this year. What are you looking to get out of the offense this year?
In the immortal words of my buddy Joe the Councilman Barnett, it can only get better. It can only get better, right? That's kind of where I'm at with this team. The offense, while yes, we got a lot of yards on the ground, was maddening as hell to watch last season, and I'm expecting better quarterback play. I'm expecting this. I think I said earlier, a completion percentage over 60%. I'm expecting an improved red zone efficiency, particularly from a touchdown standpoint. And just all in all, I want to see a cohesive, kind of intentional approach from the coaching staff where game in, game out, it looks like we know what we're doing, or we know what we're trying to do. We know what we're trying to execute. These are college players. There's going to be errors, but certainly less turnover prone. I want to be tighter with the football. I don't want to lose games based on the Bearcats fumbling the execution. No pun intended there, I guess. I'd rather see us execute. If we have to punt, we're punting. We're not going to give over short yardage situations through interceptions, through fumbles. We're going to, lean on Kiner, get him to like a 13 to 1,400 yard rushing season, double-digit touchdown production. Work off him with play action, hit some of these new receivers deep down the field. That's kind of where I'm at, and kind of handing Sorsby the reins and saying, show us what you got, kid. That's really what I'm hoping for, is to see that all the well-hyped investment we're making in Brendan Sorsby to be worth it, and that this is someone who can actually build a football program around.
Yeah. All excellent things. I don't think there's no fan out there that doesn't want those. Stability for me is the big thing. Even if there is a mistake made, can you go back out there next drive and right the wrongs, right? Can you make the needed play if we are in a do or die situation, right? Game on the line against your rival, God forbid. Can we not have a inside fan joke of, oh my God, we scored? Did we score in the 20? Well, technically it was on the 20, but I guess that's a red zone TD, and I also hope that rushing attack continues to be what it needs to be, because that is the league we're in currently, right? We are in a league with some of the best running backs in the country right now.
If our rushing attack isn't good this year, we're in trouble. So rushing attack, I'm baking that in. It has to be good.
It has to stay good. It has to be good. Better passing overall, like you mentioned, and evolved passing as well. Not just the deep ball and somehow we get it, but we can throw it, over the middle a little bit when need be, or make those complicated out routes that, don't float, 5 yards that way past their hands or over their head. No one's slipping in the end zone on just a fluke, play. This brings us to superlatives. Rushing TD leader.
No brainer, right? I feel like our superlatives are quite simple.
Yeah,
we agree. Kiner would be my easy pick for running back TD leader. What about yards?
Probably him still too.
It's going to be Kiner.
Yeah,
it's going to be Kiner.
He's just gonna own that game this year.
In fact, it's sort of, things have sorted themselves out quite simply for the Bearcats. We kind of know who our top receiver is. It's going to be Xavier Henderson.
Yep.
We know who our top running back is. It's going to be Corey Kiner. We know who our top quarterback is. It's going to be Brendan Sorsby.
Yep.
That leaves us with more answers than I think we had coming into last season. It's just whether or not it can be, is it enough production to really compete in the Big 12 and get to that magical 6-game number? Yeah.
Is it enough to do that? Is it enough to be a whole team? Honestly. Because there it is times where it's just like it looked like you're teaching these guys how to play football almost last year. Just some of the weirdest, I guess we'll try this moments last year.
Right. No, and that's the taste I have in my mouth of watching year one of Scott Satterfield football. That is the biggest indictment on him, was that year one watching it was like, has this team ever played football before? And from a Cincinnati Bearcat fan perspective, that is the brand of football Scott Satterfield brought to Cincinnati. And clean up on aisle 5. That's what's needed in year 2 here, is can we look like a team that knows what the hell they're doing?
Yeah. Oh, we forgot receiving TD leader.
Good one. Receiving TD leader. I'm going to stick with Henderson. I think Henderson will end up being the guy, even though he only had 3 touchdowns last year. I guess I think I have a feeling where you're going with it. Who's your receiving touchdown leader?
It's either going to be him or one of the Royer. I mean,
I figured you'd go Royer.
Just
since you have him going over on all of Mateer's stats, that would be
if we
over
are
5
to
touchdowns.
improve in red zone defense, it's going to be one of those guys. If we are opening up the passing game and it's not rushing consistently,
yeah,
your tight end's going to be the body in there that can withstand those hits. Because I mean, the slot receivers we brought in aren't necessarily big body, go over the back of the streak them over the back of the end zone, kind of guys.
We really are going to need someone to step up in addition to Henderson, and I guess Royer's that guy. If it's not Royer, it might be tough to expect huge improvements in the passing game.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk too much about it.
Mateer's talented, man. Mateer is a talented tight end.
He just,
big loss for Cincinnati, big loss for Colorado too.
Yeah, and he was when we interviewed by the ASU guys, they asked about him, and all we could tell them was about what we heard or what the perception was. But no fine details on what happened here with him.
You just have to make sure you give them the caveat. Like, look, when players leave Cincinnati for another team, the powers that be typically don't report nice things about them. I've never heard nice things reported about the guys that leave to another program.
No, rarely. Rarely. We didn't talk about the tight end room too much outside of Joe Royer. We have some other guys back who were expected to be starting tight ends last year. And then the freshman in Gavin Grover, who has also been turning some heads. So be on the lookout for that as well. Well, Coomer, I appreciate you joining me tonight and my rotating cavalcade of a host. Well
done, Darin. Yeah, it's been a pleasure as usual. Thanks for having me back. Let's see how these new faces for the Cincinnati Bearcats play out here in 2024.
Well, cheers.
Cheers, buddy. Go Bearcats.